Hi, I'm Sam, and this is Matt Bolland, and we're the project directors of Project 2050, which is this year's Sheffield Engineering Leadership Academy's exhibition at Festival of the Mind. Before I talk a little bit more, and me and Matt talk a little bit more about the exhibition, we thought we'd tell you a little bit about who we are and what SELA is. So SELA is a selective scheme unique to the University of Sheffield, where 40 undergraduate engineers per year are taken on, and throughout their 2 years on the scheme, they'll work with industry partners through workshops, boot camps and projects, working out real problems, making real solutions, learning real transferable skills, and hopefully making the engineers of the future. And one of our projects was this Project 2050. I'll pass you on to Matt to talk a little bit more about it.
So we decided to make Project 2050, essentially because no matter what happens, engineers are going to be the ones that solve the world's biggest issues in the coming years. And we wanted to show people the breadth of the impact that they personally can have through STEM, so science, technology, engineering and maths. And we wanted to also challenge the idea that engineering has sometimes of being quite dry, focused on maths, people as human calculators just working behind a desk all day, because it's really not that. And we wanted to show people, by using the Festival of the Mind's whole point of bringing the juncture between art and science, that engineers really rely on their drive and their creativity, sometimes possibly more than they rely on their mathematical or analytical skills. And we wanted to show people that it's very accessible and that by getting involved, they can really have a huge impact on the entire world. And particularly this year, it's quite obvious that some of the issues that the world will face are quite possibly bigger, scarier and closer than we might like to think. And these unprecedented issues are going to be solved by engineers. They're going to be rolling their sleeves up and getting stuck in and solving whatever the world might throw at us to try and make the world a better place for everyone in it. And as the world navigates these political, geophysical and socio-economic uncertainties, it will be the future engineers that sort it all out, essentially. And engineers are going to be the ones that tackle these problems head on and see what good they can do in the world. Engineers have been solving issues for hundreds of years and they will continue to do so for thousands more. But as we get into this new technology age driven by data and information, engineers' roles are going to change drastically. So courses and careers are quickly becoming much more interdisciplinary and wide-ranging, and the 21st century and 22nd century engineer is going to be really different to the 20th century engineer. And we wanted to show that you can get involved in almost every aspect of society, from energy to medicine, transportation, robotics, AI, environmental engineering. And it's going to be really, really exciting to see how the field develops over the next 20, 50, 100 years. We wanted to show people that they can get involved with Project 2050. So we selected 5 potential issues just to show the amount of effect everyone can have with STEM and with the University of Sheffield and with engineering as a course and as a career. And it's going to be essentially really exciting. That's what we want people to take away from it. And so Sam's going to tell you a little bit more about one of our 5 topics that we decided to go for.
Yeah, so the first topic we went for was natural disasters. So with growing populations and buildings getting taller and bigger because of it, and global warming causing more frequent and heavier weather phenomenon, natural disasters are becoming a much bigger problem currently. And the overall fix would be to solve overpopulation and global warming, but these aren't quick fixes. They're going to take years and years to do, and potentially some of the damage that's been done is irreversible. So we need to look for solutions today, now, to help people now, to save lives. And this is where engineers are invaluable. For example, with earthquakes, engineers can build fantastic things like in skyscrapers with rotating masses to counteract the sway of the building to keep it upright, to just building stronger, better damped buildings. But these solutions are all semi-straightforward for engineers. These are what you would think they would do. But the real problems come with things like cost. So a lot of countries where earthquakes are a really big problem can't afford to have these wonderful, great solutions. And that's where engineers need to look for more sustainable and cost-effective measures. For example, in poorer countries where flooding is a massive problem, they can't afford to have massive flooding infrastructure like in London with the Thames Barrier. So engineers need to look for more effective solutions like cheaper ways to filter out water to reduce waterborne diseases. And another stall is actually demonstrating this in Festival of the Mind in the Futurecade, simulating where floods might happen and how people might react and finding ways to have solutions to that. So yeah, that's the first problem. If Matt wants to speak about next.
One of the other ones we decided to go for our future issues to focus on was water. So it's no surprise that water is ridiculously critical. It underpins all life across the globe. And as we try to support a rapidly growing population on the planet, supplying water is going to be such a difficult issue because there is a finite amount of it and there's no alternative to using it. And there are loads of ideas already out in the world, you know, stuff like saltwater desalination and rainwater collection, but there are so many more that we don't know yet. And these are the issues, these are the solutions that future engineers are going to be able to think of, imagine and then enact. And we wanted to demonstrate the breadth of what civil engineering can accomplish, which would be the type of engineer that would solve these issues. And as a mechanical engineer coming into university, I imagine civil engineering as very much 3 years learning about concrete, but it's so much more than that. So if you were to look out of a window, we've not got one here, but if you look out of a window near you, everything you can see that hasn't grown was most likely created through civil engineering. And then even the stuff that has grown is quite possibly nurtured or cared for or protected by environmental engineering. So as civil engineers aren't just responsible for buildings and car parks and pipes, they're also quite capable and heavily involved in nurturing and creating beauty and life on huge scales across continents and countries, and having an incredibly huge effect on the biodiversity and the future of our world. And looking further, there's also a completely hidden world that most people might not even know exists or ever get to see, but the civil engineers will be working towards that and with that. And then, of course, as the field grows and develops, there are going to be exciting new challenges that need to be solved that we can't even imagine yet, but the future engineers possibly watching now are going to be the ones that are solving these problems, because that's what an engineer is. It's a problem solver.
So possibly the biggest challenge to all engineers and all STEM people, which is science, technology, engineering, maths, so scientists, engineers and mathematicians and the like. The biggest problem to all of us is harnessing and using green energy like wind farms and solar power. And this is all areas of engineering are used in to help this issue. For example, with just a wind turbine, you'd need civil engineers to build the infrastructure to put it on and build it and make it stay upright, mechanical engineers to make the gearing inside, electrical engineers to make efficient ways of making the electricity, aerospace engineers to make the turbine blades work in the wind, and I could mention a whole load more. So this shows that problems aren't just solved by one kind of engineering or one engineer just with his little notebook, but it involves a whole team of people to fix these problems. But the biggest problem is not making the green energy, because we've got ways of doing that. Sure, we need better ones, but the bigger problem, in my opinion, is using the green energy. So, for example, planes. We all use planes, and the world wouldn't be the same without planes. We can't get rid of them because it would just change the way the world works. But they all use, or all commercial ones use fossil fuels still, and we haven't found a way of harnessing green electricity, and like battery-powered planes. And there's loads of research going into it, but not many solutions are out there yet, and not any viable ones. So that's a big area where engineers can cause a lot of change. And sure, you could kind of say that engineers caused the problem with global warming, designing these planes and the cars that guzzle fuel and spit out fumes. But at the time, they were solving a problem, which was transportation, and they solved that problem, and they wouldn't have known what the future implications of it were. And now we live in a world that can't live without cars and planes. But it's the engineers, at the end of the day, and scientists that need to find the solutions to make these sustainable again, so we can carry on using them for future generations. Yeah.
So one of the other aspects that we decided to follow was quite closely linked to water, was the idea of food going into the future and how we're going to feed, again, our rapidly growing population. So obviously we can't live without it, but with our current trends and our consumer desire for choice, especially here in the West, our toll on the global biodiversity by our use of land, particularly for stuff like meat production, is going to be quite possibly unsustainable going forward. So, and we need to be able to protect our biodiversity as a matter of huge importance. And the way that we consume our food and create our food is critical to this. So it's very likely that sort of looking 20, 50, 70 years into the future, our diets could quite possibly be unrecognisable. Our grandkids could be swapping steak and mince for ants and crickets, and loads of other sort of different ideas that could quite easily become staples of our diets going forward, but could quite easily just be something that doesn't happen at all. So other things, for instance, if we run out of land to farm and cultivate, what happens? Do we build up? Do we build vertical farms? Do we use hydroponics? Ideas like that are already being developed and looked at. But then again, as I said before, there are so many more that we're going to find and analyse and try out and see what happens. And there's no way of telling exactly what it could be. Whether we could, grow our meat in labs instead of raising it, or your doctor could possibly prescribe you algae for a nutrient boost. And things like that seem almost fantastical and ridiculous now, but as I say, in 20 years, it could quite be the norm that you'd go to the shops for a bag of algae. And we don't know, because being honest, anything could happen going forward. And that's one of the exciting parts about engineering. You get to be involved in such an exciting and fast-paced world. And we do know that as a species, we have to be more sustainable in every facet of our existence, particularly to save our wildlife, our fish stocks, our global biodiversity. And it's going to be the job of future engineers to look at that and to imagine solutions and to get them done and to save species of plants, animals, fish, anything. And it's going to be our job and the job of future engineers to get that done.
So another, our final stall, which when we first got this project, the title of our project given to us, or the aim of our project given to us, we didn't think this would be quite as relevant as it is now. So this stall was on antibacterial resistance and the race against bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics, sorry. And the problem being that over time, as bacteria get more resistant to different kinds of antibiotics, the harder it gets to make new ones because things that we've tried in the past aren't possible anymore. And this is a massive area in mainly, I'd say, biology, but also bioengineering, finding ways of actually making these antibiotics. And we've all seen what happens when you have an illness that you don't have treatments for. Like, for example, with COVID. I'm not saying that I've been told to make sure that, to say that antibiotics are not a cure for COVID. But we've all seen what happens when we don't have a cure for something, and it's not great. So if we didn't have antibiotics, we'd go back to times where a little nick in the skin could cause you losing your arm because you got it infected. So this is a really big thing that we need to carry on working towards, and we need those bioengineers and biologists to work towards this. But it's not just as simple as, we can make these, more people making them means we can get new ones. We need the funding for it, but we also need to get it to countries that can't afford it and people that can't afford it. And there's that fine balance between paying for it so people can invest it and make new antibiotics, but also getting it to the people that need it and can't afford it. And then not only that, we need to look at ways of educating people on the misuse of antibiotics. For example, taking half of a prescription and feeling better and then stop using it, because that just helps towards the resistant bacteria growing, and overuse of antibiotics as well. So we need there's whole streams of science that work towards changing public perception towards antibiotics, and helping the misuse of antibiotics.
And then they were our 5 topics that we decided to focus on with our project, but obviously there are hundreds, if not thousands, of more issues that the world will face that engineers get to solve or have to solve. And with our project, we originally created it back in about March, wasn't it? It was about March. And our original plan was to create a physical installation at the Festival of the Mind, at the Futurecade. And it is there now. It's in the Millennium Gallery. You can feel free to go and visit whenever you like, just as long as it's been between the hours of 10 and 4. And But obviously COVID hit, and we went down into lockdown in the middle of March, and that affected our project quite severely because our team couldn't come together. And then going through summer, and as we found out exactly the toll that the virus was taking on our society and what the immediate future was looking like, with the Festival of the Mind, we decided to make a digital version of our project. And that was so that people who might not be able to get to the Futurecade during the virus, or anyone who's worried about that, can still engage with our project and still start a conversation and get thinking about how STEM can impact them and what they can do too. So when we decided to create our digital project, we stripped our project right back to the fundamentals that we wanted to impart on people. So we wanted to demonstrate the breadth of engineering and demonstrate to each individual person that the impact that you can have through STEM is unimaginably huge. And so it's live now. We have created it. So you can go and find it. It's on the Festival of the Mind website. Just go after this video, wait until we've finished. And participants in our digital project, it's essentially a bit of a game, but it shows you a possibility of a world 2050, so 30 years in the future from now. And you, as an engineer, have to make certain choices on different issues going forward based around the 5 issues that we've focused on already. And you're presented with 2 choices that quite clearly one is not necessarily better than the other. You get pros and cons, and you have to use your creativity and natural judgment to figure out what you think would be the best choice for the world. And then going forward, you create your own personal world by navigating the issues that you're presented with. And at the end, you get to see the world that you've created and the world that you have transpired in 2050. And it's really exciting, and we hope that you get the same out of it that we have, showing how crucial you could be to the entire world. And it's, incredible to show what massive effect on the entire world 5 small choices could have. So I really encourage everyone to go and see it, because it's going to be really good, and then it will run parallel to the actual installation that we have at the Festival of the Mind down in the Futurecade in the Millennium Gallery. So yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to our little talk. We've left a bit of time at the end for questions. Hopefully Matt has some on his iPad.
Which we have a few of.
Good.
I'll kick straight off. The question 1, what in your opinion is the biggest engineering challenge that we currently face? Are you optimistic that the engineering/technological advancement will solve the problem? Which is a huge question.
It's huge. Personally, I think the biggest thing that will make a change, if we can say we make something big breakthrough today, would be a way of storing electricity, like batteries, that is equally as energy rich as fuel, so energy dense as fuel, so as light as the equivalent amount of fuel would be, because then we could build electric planes, hundreds of electric cars, and power them off all of our wind power and solar power and nuclear power, and get rid of all the use of fossil fuels. That's my personal opinion.
And particularly in the light of the pandemic, I think that medical advancements and medical engineering is going to be one of the biggest issues we've got to face, because as we face a growing global population that's getting older as well on average, developing vaccines and cures and treatments for things such as cancer and COVID-19 is going to be an absolutely mammoth task that, again, we've got no idea how exactly it's going to work, but there's some really exciting work going on. And I do have faith that through engineering and technology we can sort these issues out. Just so long as we have enough funding, enough drive and enough belief in ourselves, we can sort anything out.
If they're going to get sorted out, it will be through engineering and technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got another question. So it's interesting that you acknowledged engineers sometimes inadvertently cause problems, for example, global warming from transport and industrialisation, etc. Do you think we have learned from that?
I think we have. Personally, as an undergraduate on an engineering course, everything we get taught is with the underlying intent of being sustainable. We have to verify everything we're doing. It isn't as simple as, we could do this. It's, you have to think about, what about the people that live 10 miles away from your factory? What about the emissions you're putting into the air? Is there a safer way of doing it? I think that we have learned from it, just from my personal experience of working with people from industry and just in university itself and what we get taught. I personally think that,
Sustainability really is the watchword of the industry at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's a second part. How do we try to guard against new solutions introducing new problems? Which again is a tough question.
That's a hard question.
I think that engineers, as a rule, are always trying to work towards a better society, and we're always trying to create better solutions to the problems that we currently have. And we try, especially at the moment, to have as much forethought as we possibly can. But there is that element of uncertainty, and going forward, no one knows what the world is going to look like in 20, 50 years. And your solutions could work right now, but then going forward, they might be have a completely different effect that you could never guess. So I think the fact that engineers will always try to work to make it better is quite reassuring, because no matter what happens, there will always be people working their absolute socks off to fix anything that we could possibly do and anything that could possibly happen.
Yeah. I think there's always that risk that something could go wrong, but without trying, we'll never make any advancements.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've got one final question. Okay. What protocols exist or might be used for prioritising some of the solutions to so many potential problems? Again, these are tough questions today.
I suppose it depends at what level these problems are. So if it's like flooding in Bangladesh, it might be a government level problem or a world organisation problem. And I suppose it's down to them to decide where they're deploying their assets. Because fundamentally it all relies on how much money you've got to spend on these solutions and how many people are willing to help. And it's up to... I suppose engineers are important in making those decisions, but there are, for the big problems, it does end up always with a political battle.
There's so many moving cogs to every, particularly global issues. So, for instance, a lot of issues that we've mentioned before, like the industrialisation was very much industry-driven, wasn't it? So businesses were just doing whatever they would like to make profit, and then that obviously caused a big issue. But now there's a lot of governmental pressure as well as consumer pressure from the people who are actually buying the goods from the universities to be more green and more sustainable. So the protocols that go forward will intrinsically have a financial aspect to it, won't it? So whether companies can afford to do it or whether industries can afford to do it and countries can afford to do it, but also what actually gets done and what gets enacted is very much up to the population as a whole. If buying habits completely shift, industry is going to be forced into changing the way they do things. But then on top of that, it's going to be the scientists and the engineers that analyse their own creations and their own ideas will be deciding particularly what gets done, because we'll essentially just be finding out what works. So that's how we're going to particularly find out which solutions get used more than others or used at all. Oh, I lied before. We have a final question.
This is the final question.
This is the final question.
Okay.
What types of engineering do we study, and why did you choose them? Okay,
so this might be a bit contrary to what we've all talked about. Well, I suppose it's not. So we're both mechanical engineers, and speaking for myself, but I think it's similar with Matt. We like cars. When I was at school, I always had a love for F1 and everything. Like I could get my hands on cars. I could tinker with an engine or something like that. And I've always wanted to do something down those lines. And obviously, especially now, having done a few years at university and working in industry, you realise how important it is to go away from internal combustion engines and electric cars. So, for example, we're both in a former student team, and we're both looking at making an electric car in future years as opposed to the internal combustion one now. So everything's going that way, and we're going with it. But yeah, the initial reason I decided to do mechanical engineering is probably not a good one. It's because I like loud cars.
Similar-ish process to me. When I was looking at university, I'd already decided that I'd like to do some sort of engineering. But when you start to look into it, you do find that there are so many more fields and courses and options that you just never sort of come across until you're actually looking for it. And I went for mechanical engineering because I saw mechanical engineering as one of the most flexible subjects, and that it can apply to lots of different fields and be used in so many different ways, and that if I studied mechanical engineering, I reckon that would be my best way of making an actual physical impact on the world to try and help people. And I've now come to realise that that's true of every single discipline of engineering, because the courses nowadays are so interdisciplinary, and the students that graduate are so broadly skilled. anyone can do an engineering degree or any science or technology or maths degree or course of any kind, including apprenticeships and things like that, and they can go out and make a massive difference to the world. So I think I chose right, touch wood. So yeah.
Yeah, that definitely impacted my choice. When I was going around universities, it did seem that mechanical engineering seemed to be the most applicable to most situations, but then you actually realise that not one engineer, like I spoke about earlier with the turbine, not one type of engineering can fix a problem. It takes a whole team of not just engineers, not just scientists, but all disciplines, everyone, marketing, geography, everything. But yeah, so I was a bit naive there, but
yeah.
I'm happy with my choice still.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But yes, so that's the end of our questions. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed us ramble on about engineering and the future of the world. Our Festival of the Mind physical instalment is up right now in the Futurecade in the Millennium Gallery down in the middle of Sheffield. And our digital project is live on the Festival of the Mind website. Yeah. So feel free to check out both of them. I hope you enjoy them. And thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you very much. Cheers.